King Charles III is proclaimed Australia's new sovereign, and the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, declares a public holiday to mark the death of Queen Elizabeth II. A solid weekend for auction results as banks pass through rate rises and Qantas CEO Alan Joyce's pay under scrutiny. It's Monday, the 12th of September 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Adam Lang, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Adam. What a great weekend. The weather was good, plenty of sport going on. Obviously very sad about Queen Elizabeth II, but just watching the pomp and ceremony, it really is something to behold.
I think you're right, Sean. It'd be a time I certainly look back and go, geez, that was a really pivotal moment in part of my life, the backdrop to my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that's going on in the UK and how that's filtered to other parts of the Commonwealth, it really has been a weekend which I think we'll all remember.
Quite right, Sean. So let's get on with the podcast. And immediately at the end of this one, stay listening for Sean's chat with Daniel Grayling from Russell Investments.
Yeah, Daniel Grayling runs a section of Russell Investments which outsources chief investment officers, mostly for not-for-profit, so a charity. It has a fund to invest and it goes to Daniel and his team to invest it. And so we just talk about how he does it, whether there's more responsibility because he's investing for a charity or not. Really fascinating chat.
Now, Sean, for the main story this morning, King Charles III has been officially proclaimed as Australia's new sovereign during a ceremony at Parliament House yesterday, and Australia will observe a public holiday on Thursday, September 22nd, in honour of Queen Elizabeth II.
The proclamation announcing the monarch's ascension following the death of Queen Elizabeth II was read out by Governor-General David Hurley yesterday morning. He said Australia is an unfinished product and is now entering a new era. The proclamation ceremony began with a procession of the Australian Defence Force, followed by a welcome to country. Following the proclamation, God Save the King was played, with flags raised to full mast. An Indigenous spiritual dance then followed before a 21-gun salute rang out across the capital. State proclamations were also made yesterday, and there are a couple today as well. The Prime Minister and the Governor-General will travel to London later this week to attend the funeral at Westminster Abbey. While there is no official mourning period, Federal Parliament, which was due to sit this week in Canberra, has been suspended. The Prime Minister said the government would look to make up the days following the period of mourning.
Sean, with the world unanimous in its support of Queen Elizabeth, people are starting to wonder what Charles III will be like.
King Charles promised to uphold the constitutional democracy and copy his mother's devotion to duty. If he can do that, he'll be okay. She was an incredible hard worker, Elizabeth II. Charles III said the monarch was a servant of the people, now well known for his strong views on climate change. King Charles said his life will change as he takes up new responsibilities, and royal watchers expect him to tone down his rhetoric on that subject around climate change.
Sean, I'm finding this fascinating because people are mourning the Queen. She's been with us for all of my lifetime. And I have been also really intrigued by the pomp and the ceremony. It's just so rare. And how Charles will respond to all of it.
Yeah, look, like most funerals, there's great loss, but there's also a sense of excitement. I think that's what we're all feeling at the moment. It is a new era. One of my favourite stories actually came from the Washington Post. There's been so much written on what's going on in the UK at the moment. But the Washington Post story talks about music taste in Britain since the death of the Queen, and it's changed. Now, part of this is deliberate. So radio stations have cut their advertising and they've cut on-air competitions, things like that, and they're toning down their music fare. Now, this is right up your street, Adam. So Coldplay's The Scientist.
Okay, very pensive.
Yeah. Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Sure.
Drive by the Cars.
Brilliant.
And Non-Stop Adele.
There's an Adele song for every occasion.
That's right. So the era of Queen Elizabeth II is over. Charles III has ascended. Let's hope his reign is a good one.
All right, Sean, let's move on. What's the setting for the local markets this week?
Well, the S&P ASX 200 finished on Friday up 0.7% to 6,894 points, led higher by the materials companies. Fortescue Metals was up nearly 6%. Rio Tinto and BHP both finished up 3%. Energy stocks also did well, while consumer staples were the main underperformers. Woolworths, for example, closed down 1.6%. Biotech Imugene and tracking company Life360 were the worst performers. Both fell more than 4%. In corporate news, Australia's largest private hospital operator, Ramsay Health Care, pulled the pin on the sale of its 50-50 joint venture In Asia, Ramsay had received an indicative offer of $1.83 billion, but isn't going ahead on that one. And also New Zealand dairy cooperative Fonterra lifted its earnings guidance while revising down milk collection forecasts. Its share price jumped 4.6%.
And Sean, the uncertain context is really an international one. How are global markets looking?
Well, it's actually a pretty strong end to the week on Wall Street, with the broad-based S&P 500 up 1.5% over the weekend and the tech-heavy Nasdaq rising more than 2%. That, of course, augurs well for the local market today. Cryptocurrencies had a much better session, with Bitcoin jumping 10% to be trading back above 21,000 US dollars a unit. The Aussie dollar is trading 68.3 US cents, and Brent crude is under 90 US dollars a barrel. I'm certainly enjoying these cheaper petrol prices at the moment. Now, Adam, it's a big week in the US with official inflation data due for release. There's a growing view among economists that inflation may have peaked, which would be very good news. It doesn't mean that interest rates have peaked, but if inflation has peaked, you can expect to see some tapering off, at least of the speed of interest rate hikes, and that would be good news.
Sean, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. It was a solid weekend for auction results, with the national clearance rate back above 60%.
It was. In fact, it was the second selling weekend of spring, and at least this week, most auctions were held. Remember last week, there were a large number of withdrawals from the market. The Melbourne clearance rate was 61%, according to Domain, and Sydney's clearance rate was 62%. If you wanted some perspective on just how hot the market was in 2021, on the same weekend last year, the clearance rates were 76% in Melbourne and 83% in Sydney.
Wow.
Far above the 61 and 62% this weekend. Back to this weekend, Brisbane's auction clearance rates remain the lowest among the capital cities at 46%, Adelaide's best at 78%, and Canberra was at 54%.
What an incredible difference over 12 months that is, Sean. I wonder what the next 12 months will bring.
Yeah, let's hope they go up, not down.
Yeah. And Sean, the banks were quick to move on interest rates last week after the Reserve Bank lifted the official cash rate.
Yes, well, some were quicker than others, to be honest. Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, ANZ, Macquarie Bank and Bendigo and Adelaide have passed on higher rates already. Westpac is likely to do so in coming days. Some, including Macquarie and Commonwealth Bank, have lifted deposit rates. Others, notably National Australia Bank and ANZ, just a slightly tardier, shall we say.
We'll keep an eye on it. It's annual general meeting time, and there's always plenty of interest in annual reports. How much CEOs are getting paid?
Yes, and Qantas's notice of its AGM was released on Friday, full of details about executive pay. Chief Executive Alan Joyce got paid $2.3 million last financial year, up 15%, but it's still well below his remuneration pre-COVID. In 2018, Mr. Joyce received nearly $11 million, way below that. There are also no short-term bonuses this time around. There's been much speculation about Mr. Joyce's pay, given the poor performance of the airline in recent months and negotiations with workers over pay. Now, Chair Richard Goyder said the COVID restart had been bumpy, but the group's latest performance figures show it's back on track.
Sean, older people live outside capital cities. Darwin is the youngest capital city in terms of age of its population, and every capital outside the Northern Territory has more females than males.
That's right. There's some great information flowing from last year's census, which the Bureau of Statistics is gradually releasing. People over the age of 55 years make a smaller proportion of the population in capital cities in the rest of Australia, while 20 to 44-year-olds make up a higher proportion in capital cities. The median age in Darwin is 34 and a half years. That's easily the youngest. In Canberra, it's 35.4 years. Adelaide is the oldest, with a median age of 39.3 years, while in Hobart, it's 36.6 years. Now, across all capital cities, there are 98.2 males for every 100 females, though in Hobart, that falls back to 95 males per 100 females.
Sean, at my age, I'm dragging the average up.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. We're very similar ages, and I'm being generous to myself and when I say that.
And we're sticking around in the cities.
That's right.
Lithium stock Minerals Resources finished up 14% on Friday and is up around 65% in just over a month. What is driving it?
All the lithium stocks have done well, but this has done spectacularly. The reason, on Friday at least, is a report in the Financial Review that said the miner was considering spinning off and listing its growing lithium arm in the US, adding that JP Morgan is working on the plan. Now, Mineral Resources only recently restructured into 4 areas: mining services, iron ore, energy, and lithium. No prizes for guessing which part of the business is considered most valuable. In a statement on Friday, the group said any initiative to spin off the US lithium business was not sufficiently advanced enough to warrant more comment. That's not exactly a denial.
No, it's not. And moving on to Newey, Sean. Newey's share price got a kick along on Friday as well, jumping 25% after reports that a US group was interested in acquiring the business.
It's a bit like Mineral Resources. There was a media report and suddenly its share price takes off. Just shows how influential the media is. Now, this one was in the Australian newspaper. It said that US software company Reveal had hired investment bank Barrenjoey for a possible tilt at Newey. Newey went into a trading halt and released a statement saying no bid had been received. But that didn't really address the question about whether Reveal was interested, which is what the report said. Interestingly, Newey also disclosed on Friday that Chief Executive Jonathan Rubinstein had bought 350,000 shares in the struggling investigative analytics and intelligence software company. I think this one will be one to watch.
And Sean, moving on to overseas news, Russia has abandoned its main bastion in northeastern Ukraine after Ukrainian troops made a rapid advance.
Yes, this is very significant. The fall of the town in the Kharkiv province was Moscow's worst defeat since its troops were forced back from the capital, Kyiv, in March, according to Reuters. Ukraine called it a turning point in the 6-month-old war, with thousands of Russian soldiers leaving behind ammunition stockpiles and equipment as they retreated. Russian forces had used the area as the logistics base for one of their main campaigns, a months-long assault from the north on the adjacent Donbass region. It has left the front pages, this war in Ukraine, but it's certainly dragging on. And there is just about as many reports as Ukrainian victories as there are Russian victories.
Sean, moving a little closer to our region, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake has hit the highlands of Papua New Guinea.
The quake hit yesterday morning in a region where tens of thousands of people live, though it's not clear yet what damage has been sustained. While earthquakes are not uncommon in the highlands, this one was particularly violent and lengthier. Now, Papua New Guinea sits on the Pacific's Ring of Fire, the arc of seismic faults around the Pacific Ocean where much of the world's earthquakes and volcanic activity occurs. More information, I'm sure, we'll hear over the coming days as rescuers reach some of these very isolated areas.
Yeah, and good luck to all of those rescuers and first responders.
Absolutely.
And global audit and advisory firm EY has approved a plan to split the group into separate audit and advisory businesses, with a vote now going to 13,000 partners.
EY is one of the big 4 in the sector, along with Deloitte, KPMG and PwC. If the partners agree to split the 2 businesses, no mean feat when there's 13,000 partners. Imagine trying to get agreement on that. Whew, good luck. Anyway, the advisory arm is likely to be listed on the stock market next year if that gets a tick of approval from the partners. It will also potentially unlock hundreds of millions of dollars in value for those partners. Maybe that's how they get the tick of approval, Adam.
There's a driver.
Yeah, I think we've got it. All the 4 big firms are under pressure to split their operations to get around regulatory and perceived conflicts of interest between advice and audit. If EY go for it and get it through, the other 3 may well follow.
Sean, the Big 4 and many other accounting firms, of course, too, but the Big 4 are very interesting to me in that their heritage is in audit and basic accounting, but they've all grown to do so much more than that. So this split is like a recognition of that evolution.
Yeah, and that because it was the partnership structure, that was unusual too, and it's almost anachronistic now. And so I think they're all trying to overcome this conflict of interest issue, as well as how do you manage 13,000 partners in the case of EY.
Yeah. Well, Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Daniel Grayling from Russell Investments.
That's right. We mentioned this at the top of the show, all about outsourcing the chief investment officer role, which many organisations do, particularly not for profits. It's just really fascinating whether he thinks about it any differently and how ESG and so those sorts of issues come into it when you're investing for charities. Fascinating chat.
That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam.
It's Monday, the 12th of September, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Adam Lang, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.